Hi, and welcome to SpookBox, the only podcast where being a symbiote with a pig is a perfect reason to get a punk haircut. I'm joined this week by my housemates, as always, Dav.
Hey guys, how's it going, SpookBox Nation?
And Heather.
Hi.
Yeah, no fancy intro from you, Heather.
I like to save all the good bits for the film.
Keep it for
I'm not doing any kind of witty gymnastics.
Keep them waiting. I like it.
Keep
Do
it
you know
for
what I
the
mean?
cast.
It's not even started yet.
All right, so this week we're going to look at Upstream Color, Shane Carruth's 2013 masterpiece, arguably the greatest film of all time, according to some film critics. Perhaps some film critics that are in this room right now, perhaps this very film critic that's speaking, who knows. Just to get some first opinions right off the bat. Heather, what did you think of the film?
I underestimated my ability to understand this film when I was younger.
Oh.
And I
So you
feel
saw it before?
like now, yeah, I started watching it and I just didn't have a good enough attention span. But now that I'm inwokened, I could just sit with it and just let it happen. And it was incredible. I think that I want to talk about how you found it a bit like melodramatic at times. I want to get into that because
Wash your mouth out.
I don't know, I don't see that, but maybe I'm just not used to films like this, so
I don't even
it's hard
see
to categorize.
melodrama.
I don't even see. I live in the tenor of melodrama, so maybe it's just, I'm like, what are you talking about? It's a regular film.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
yeah.
my blind spot, but
Yeah.
so cool. Mostly want to talk about the story and the script because I think it's a really cool sci-fi that we've not really seen. And we were wondering whether it comes under horror.
It doesn't.
Yeah,
We just want to talk about
I'm
it.
so angry right
I'm
now.
blatantly cheating.
No. The genre is spooky.
I feel like
we're
we need to-
SpookBox. Is it spooky?
I
It's
feel
pretty
like-
spooky.
I feel like this is Connor cashing in his loyalty card,
Cashing in.
basically. It's like he's done enough spooky films that he can do one. He gets like one free
What-
coffee, essentially.
Yeah.
He gets a free pass.
Pretentious.
This, so like
bullshit
every
art
10 movies. Oh my god, is this the 10th episode? I think
This
it
is the 10th episode.
Every 10th episode now we'll
just do
a
something
non-horror
else.
film.
Yeah.
Just to
Yeah.
keep it fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you are. I
Next-
don't know if I even said thoughts there, but
Episode 20 is definitely going to be The Fall by Tarsum. Have you seen it?
No.
Oh god, it's
Also,
so
not
pretentious.
if I get Howard the Duck in there first.
no, we are not doing
It's
Howard
spooky.
the Duck.
It's
It is spooky.
It's
all,
so
all we're
spooky.
looking is it spooky or not? Howard the Duck's definitely spooky as hell. Really
Nothing spookier than
unnerving.
80s excess.
Awful. So yeah.
Do you want to let me know what you thought of it, Dav? Or?
Yeah, I would. It's funny that you said pretentious because it was one of the words that I came across time and time again when I was reading reviews about this film.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you should say that you saw it when it came out.
I'd like started watching it
So
and
2013.
I found it, yeah, I probably found it too pretentious, but it's not. I think that it's just that I thought that a film like that wasn't accessible to me or something.
It's the sort of film that a 20-year-old Dav, so if I'd have seen it in 2013, I would have been 20 years old. It was about the time that I was starting to take myself maybe a little bit too seriously.
Yeah. You so badly want to
And-
say, oh, what's your favorite film?
I like
Upstream
films.
Color.
I like films now.
Yes.
And
yes.
you know, my favorite film is, for better or worse, it's still Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
It's an
So you
incredible
must
film.
It's an
fucking
incredible
love
film.
this then.
But so in my head, I couldn't help but watch this film and believe that I definitely see my teenage self loving this film. Not quite getting
if you
it.
had the chance to see it.
Yeah, if I'd have had the chance to see it. Not quite getting it. It was refreshing to see Shane Carruth do something quite different to Primer, but still maintain this kind of I don't know,
Hard sci-fi.
hard sci-fi, but also like there is this. It's a very ambiguous film. There's
And
no
like a spooky
clear
quantum
link.
thing.
There's no clear link between cause and effect.
Disagree.
Disagree
entirely.
Okay, fine. First viewing, it seemed like, you know, there was an aspect of respect afforded to the film viewer. I think
so.
Things were not clear.
Yeah, no,
And
you are right. And
film.
there's a lot of readings of the film. There was even a lot of reviews at the time of the film that really tried to push that the film is to be interpreted rather than to be, you know, necessarily logically understood. I think just when I watched the film a second time around there, it made so much more sense to me. It really seemed to be a crystal clear bit of cinema. Shall I tell you? I'll tell you a wee story, shall I?
Let's do it.
Give us a morsel.
This nice warm fire that we're next to. Tell us a story.
Pull up next to the fire. So yeah, I saw this film in 2013, and I saw it because at the time I was studying film in Cambridge. Cambridge in the UK. You might have heard of it. And at the time, I had some better connections to people in the sort of film, not necessarily film industry, because this is very independent cinema stuff. But, you know, I had done some reviews for UK film festivals, and I happened to know some people, and I managed to ask about, and somebody had a BitTorrent link left over to a version of this film that had been used for a film festival. So I still kind of got it illegally, but it was like...
But it debuted at a film festival, right? And you got it before it was widely...
No, I got it just after.
Was this sort of like a promo piece? Is that what you mean?
No,
It was just that someone had it.
Basically the person who was in charge of screening the films at the film festival
had torrented them,
was sharing their torrents, so it was password protected. But I can't even remember who sent it to me now, but basically I just expressed to some people that I knew I really like Shane Carruth, because Primer at the time was my favorite film. It had been my favorite film since 2009 when I first saw it. I absolutely adored Primer, loved Shane Carruth as a filmmaker, and I saw this film and I watched it all alone on a wee tiny screen, coming off, I think, a Dell XPS 13 or something, some weird wee laptop. And I hated it. Absolutely hated the film.
Was it something to do with your love for Primer?
Yes.
You hated Upstream Color?
Yes, absolutely.
Did it also make you angry that, like, it wasn't immediately accessible? Like, you kind of have to...
Well,
be patient with it, I think.
So I'm really glad to hear you say that, because for talking to you before the podcast started, I actually thought that I was going to be the one to have to admit that this film is kind of impenetrable on the first go.
I think it is, yeah.
You both seem to have a pretty clear understanding of what's happening, but no, the problem was at the time that I fancied myself as something of a logical positivist.
Yeah, right.
Now, would you be knowing what that is? Because I don't think I knew when
just a little zhuzh,
I think sort of vaguely.
Refresher.
It's like analytical, not continental, in a sense.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. Yes.
Yeah.
So, you know, I thought that I had gone really hard into... Well, look, to be honest, I had read the Wikipedia page of some scientists and thought...
Was Wittgenstein a logical positivist?
No,
he wasn't.
It's getting there, though.
Yeah.
Getting there to so...
I can't remember.
I think he was seen as someone who crossed...
I have a philosophy degree. Hi.
Both those thresholds. I don't know.
Yeah.
I read the Wikipedia page too.
So I definitely thought that, you know, all things that existed in this world could be... that there was this burden of proof on things, and that, you know, we should remain skeptical and constantly trying to disprove things and to kind of endeavor for a kind of scientism with life. So Primer really appealed to me on that regard, because the whole issue in Primer is that the scientists, the engineers who are part-time inventors don't understand what it is that they've created. So, you know, it seems that there's always this kind of falsifiability in the film. You know,
wait, something's not true unless it can be falsified.
Well, you know, basically truth kind of looks after itself, and a way to approach scientific method is to come up with a hypothesis.
Logical positivism is just following on from the scientific method, but applying it to everything. Yes,
yeah. So then I was watching Upstream Color, and there seemed to be some really fantastic leaps made. I just thought it was so absurd, so ridiculous, some of the things that happen in this film that I'll cover in the recap in just a wee second. But I was so put off by what at the time I deemed to be something very unscientific. I thought that Shane Carruth had tried to go for more of a love story and had just failed miserably. So I was really put off at the time.
Yeah.
Now it turns out that I was 24 and a pretentious asshole. Didn't know what I was talking about, didn't know much about being in the world or reality, and coming back to the film last week, I was completely blown away. Yeah. It was like I couldn't really quite comprehend how much of this film I had missed the first time around.
And that, like, science is magic. Like, science that you don't understand yet seems like magic. So watching this movie, and it seems so like incredible that this
Arthur
could happen.
C. Clarke, Arthur C. Clarke.
Sure.
Science working at its perfect is indistinguishable from magic. Yeah.
So it's like, you know, without really understanding the science of how this could be like probable, then it does seem like ridiculous. But I think it just takes getting a wee bit older to
loosen up,
to see how much we don't know about how things work and how connected we are to other things. I think that when you're in your early 20s, you don't want to be connected to other things.
You're
feel
like much more individualistic.
You feel like such an individual, and you're like pursuing that individuality. So you would kind of balk at something like this. Whereas I think when you're a wee bit older, you feel heartened by it. Maybe,
which is telling, because you would balk like a chicken. Which obviously means that you're connected to chicken.
Did I say that weird? You guys always say that.
No, I'm just being an asshole.
Weird.
Right, no, should we go into a recap?
I'm dying to hear this recap. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a very shortened down recap as well, as best as I could. I miss a lot of stuff out, but it's almost intentional, you know, so here we go. So 2013, Shane Carruth's Upstream Color. Chris, played by Amy Seimetz, is a seemingly successful video editor, but is abducted by a man known only as the Thief from an upscale restaurant. The Thief brings her back to her own home, but keeps Chris in a state of seeming hypnosis for several days, during which time the Thief is able to coerce her into signing all of her money and belongings over to him. To stay awake during this time, she must transcribe Henry David Thoreau's Walden and drink nothing but minimal amounts of ice water. Once satisfied he's obtained everything, the Thief leaves Chris's house without a trace and allows Chris to eat. She finds that she is now host to a large worm under her skin, which she tries to remove with a butcher's knife. Still in a state of semi-hypnosis, although it's not hypnosis, more on that later, Chris is lured to the middle of a field by sub-frequency noises. There, an unknown man, credited in the film only as the Sampler, puts Chris into a form of sedation and connects her in vitro to a young pig. The Sampler removes the worm and leaves Chris in her car in the middle of a freeway. An unspecified amount of time passes in which Chris rebuilds her life partially, only to meet Jeff, played by Shane Carruth, a seemingly successful accountant for a global hotel chain. Jeff is inexplicably drawn to Chris and endlessly pursues her in spite of Chris's initial resistance. They begin a relationship and become quickly almost codependent on one another. Eventually, after confessing to one another about periods in their lives when they seem to lose themselves to presumed psychosis or drug addiction, Chris and Jeff realize that they are connected to one another in a special way. Their memories overlap impossibly, and they feel connections to sounds and things distant to themselves. Chris believes then that she suffers a miscarriage, but is told by doctors that she's infertile due to an invasive surgery she can't remember. Brought on by this trauma, Chris realizes that she can commune with the Sampler, presumably the man behind this whole affair. It becomes clear that the Sampler has been using the larva to infect human beings and make them symbiotic with pigs kept at his ranch, the hilariously named Quinoa Valley Recordings. He does this in order to commune with various human beings that he entangles in this way to sample the lives of others. However, in order to maintain this cycle, he must periodically drown pigs in a nearby river, allowing the decomposing bodies to entangle with the nearby plant life in order to be harvested. This time, however, he has killed Jeff and Chris's pig children. So this time, it's personal. The film...
Pigs or no? So no.
Hell yeah, it is.
Dunno.
The film climaxes with Chris and Jeff using their fused identity to trick the sampler into believing he is communing with Jeff and Chris in Jeff's workplace, only for Chris to attack the sampler in person at his ranch. The film ends with Chris, Jeff, and the other sampled people converting the ranch into a sanctuary for the pigs. How did I do?
You absolutely failed me because you missed out the bath scene in your summary.
The bath scene, the scene
where they're huddling together in the bath with the axe.
I said codependency. I thought you did a good job in selecting
what you believe to be the sort of main narrative to be.
Yeah.
Because the thing is with that plot is that it's going to be incomplete because there are so many shots that you think are so significant. Like, you didn't mention anything about the orchids.
I didn't.
You didn't mention the swimming pool.
I didn't mention the thief at the beginning.
No, I think you did really well.
You mentioned the thief.
But not his younger brother, at the beginning of the film.
Oh yeah,
of course, the ones where you first sort of see the use of this.
Yeah.
Do you think that those kind of shots then that you've missed out of your summary function to like just give the story some kind of space? Like, what do you think they're doing? Like if they get left out of a summary, what are they then?
But I feel like I think maybe skipping the first half an hour of the film is kind of a good idea because it seems like exposition a little bit. It seems like explaining is maybe kind of a loose term.
Yeah.
But it does show you what the parasites do. It sort of establishes the world a little bit.
Yeah.
And I mean, the main story is the Shane Carruth and what's Shane Carruth's character's name?
Chris and Jeff.
Chris and Jeff.
So he's Jeff, she's Chris.
Yeah. That is the story, I think.
Well, he's Jeff, she's Chris, and that's definitely presuming gender at this stage.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
What even are they now?
Yeah, sure.
She's technically Chris, some trees, some water,
a pig.
I think she's also the lamppost outside of Quinoa Recordings. She is a pig. She's the larva inside the pig.
No wonder she gets distracted at work.
I see you're saying the lamppost. You're thinking specifically of that shot where she's underneath the water and she holds that. She grabs that plant.
Yeah.
And then
can see the lamppost.
Do you know what your summary made me think though, which was really cool? Is
Go on ahead.
You talk about their codependent relationship, but I think that through the symbiosis with the pigs, you see a straight comparison between how we would never call animals codependent, like when two animals are together. When you see videos of like, look at this amazing animal friendship, and it's like a pig and a chicken that like ride around together.
I really want the comments.
Imagine the comment section being like, "Oh, so codependent." Like,
girl,
do you know?
You got to get free of that.
You need to get your independence,
cut
girl.
That hippo
like
out of
we
your
would
life.
never. We look down on animals, and we would never. But at the same time, we elevate their relationships with one another.
Yep.
But then we see ourselves as higher, but we kind of like diminish our relationships with one another in a weird way. Like we don't elevate them in the same way. Like, I don't know, you don't read animals as codependent, but you read humans as codependent. And with the straightforward comparison between them and their pig symbiotes, like, you still see that urge play out of wanting to say like, gosh, look, they're barely functioning. Whereas you would never put that on the pigs. Like, I don't know.
Capitalism, man.
And I can't help but feel like humans within capitalism are like the pigs in the pen huddling together. Like, you just have to do your best.
Yeah, bro.
Yeah.
We're the pigs in the pen.
We are the pigs in that pen. So I don't know. I feel like we're so critical of like a close symbiotic relationships as humans, because we almost think like we're in control of whether they take place or not. And I don't think we ever really are.
Damn,
man. Is this just a weird stoner movie that I take too seriously?
What do you mean? Like, am I not taking it seriously?
No, everything you just said is what I think. Maybe. Are we symbiotic?
Mabes.
We've all been spending too much time together, the three of us. Yeah.
Oh my god, imagine like a lockdown story about people that live together during lockdown that become like symbiotic.
I think This is a lockdown
that's
story.
reality.
Lockdown story.
Yeah.
Welcome to the lockdown story.
I don't know. So I think that what the film does is make you address that disparity between how we view animals and humans. And like, this is one occasion where I think that humans come off worse in that, yes, codependency is a thing, but I think that like the way that we read their relationship is like dysfunctional or something when it's like the best they can hope for in their circumstances.
That is actually something that I it's not even one of my questions, but it's one of the things, the only criticism I have of the film is this tiny niggling voice in the back of my head. Now, I will say that some of the sampled, it does seem like there's a varied mixture of race, class, creed, and gender of people
Who are involved
being
in this
sampled.
sort of, yeah.
However, it does strike me that these two cis het white people are able to lose their jobs, their lives, and all of their money for a week and bounce back just fine. Is there something weird about that? I don't know. It's just niggling.
Yeah.
It's niggling in the back of my head. It's kind of like, have you seen Lady Bird? By
I haven't seen Lady Bird, no.
It's a sweet film. Who's that by again? Lady Bird.
Greta Gerwig.
Greta Gerwig. Wonderful director, really, really skilled, like gets the fucking job done. Like, if you need...
But you're like, this girl was never in that much danger.
If you need a feel-good film, go to Greta, but yeah, the worst thing that happens to Lady Bird is that she thinks she might not get everything she wants.
Do you know what, Connor? I think you're just old. Because you're like, ugh. That's not a real problem, what the youth have. But you know what? Like, when you're young, that feels like the worst. I don't know. There's so many people that film resonates with. So, like, get what you're saying. But you're aware that, like, in the context of other struggles, that's not really a struggle at all. Fine. But that doesn't change the people for which... I don't think
Lady Bird's for me.
It's not for you.
It does seem funny how Jeff and Chris seem to just have the time to go to this ranch in the middle of nowhere. They've lost their jobs. I mean, I was always guessing that Jeff had a massive store of money, basically.
But the idea is that they can't have any stored money left over because,
it all got siphoned off fraudulently by...
Or was it implied that Jeff...
He takes all their money.
Jeff too?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But I do think that it's a good point that, like, all of the other sampled, where are they? Why are they not forming connections? Like, I guess we're to assume that they are, but the only story that we're getting told is of, like, the two cis white people being pulled together. I don't know. That is kind of...
It's a limited...
shit.
I mean, it is limited scope, and he did have, a limited ability to tell the story. I mean, do you know that the film was made on a Panasonic Lumix GH2? Which is basically...
I don't know her.
Speak English, boffin.
Yeah.
That's basically the camera I've got sitting in the other room.
Oh, really?
It's like a,
Obsessed
£500 camera. But he hacked it so that it would be able to just constantly output and wouldn't have output limits, and stuck a good lens on the front of it and just went for it, So
what do you think? What is it about the film quality that sort of... What does that add to the film quality to you?
It's just, for me, it's just incredible to show what one person essentially can make. Not that it's one person. There's a couple of hundred people involved in the making of this film, but it is a monument to just how much you can achieve if you set your mind to it and make the most out of what you can afford.
What I really enjoyed. So Shane Carruth also composed the music.
Oh yeah.
I really loved that scene with the sampler walking across the countryside, making all these different sounds on his little mixer, just sort of editing them and sort of making these compositions and writing down the sort of score. I really admired, clearly Carruth is someone who loves that process.
Like field recordings.
Yeah. I really, really enjoyed watching that. Yeah,
I watched a video this morning of a man making a harp within the hollow of a cedar tree.
Yeah.
And playing it. And it made me think of the sampler, and like, I think it's such a tactile movie. Like, Chris has to like does she not knit at some point as well to
She
stay
is knitting
awake?
at some point,
Riding,
yeah. This is when she's
swimming,
I think this is
picking
when
up the
she's hypnotized,
rocks.
is that
Like,
right?
there's so many things that they're like touching and like really ground you in your environment as well, which like makes the film kind of like weirdly aspirational for me. I'm like, oh, after I saw it, I'm like, I want to knit a scarf. I want to go to a swimming pool.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it kind of is such a horrifying thing that happens to them, but there's a kind of hope in the ways that they cope, which weirdly are ways that are passed on to them by their oppressor. Because the stuff that she repeatedly does is learn from him keeping her occupied while he steals her money.
I think that's an interesting way of reading it, but at the same time, I think one of the problems I had with the film, not problems, one of the just thoughts that I had while watching the film was, why are they so mad at him? You know, because in a sense,
the sampler,
the divisions, the boundaries between one person become kind of eroded. But I'm going to get back to that in a wee second. They become kind of eroded. They kind of break down. So in a sense, you know, Chris and Jeff do become the sampler in a sense. But then, of course,
I was actually thinking of the thief, though, in terms of like, I know that it's the sampler who orchestrates like the whole endeavor, but the thief is the one who we see kind of like manipulate them.
Is that right? That wasn't my understanding of the film at all. We can get back into this.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
Well, that's my first question.
No, the thief
yeah.
is the one that drugs Chris, ultimately puts the parasite in her, breaks into her home, keeps her occupied while he like fabricates that she's signing off all her money. You know, he makes her do that, steals all her money, presumably does the same thing to Jeff. So like, I feel like when we first meet the sampler, he's actually saving her in a way by taking the worm out of her.
See,
and
I
then
read
we
it
only
as
realize
him in
that,
control of the whole situation.
Yeah, and then we only realize that he's actually like consigned her to another different sort of trap by putting the worm in a pig and keeping it alive. But I feel like the thief was more terrifying to me at first because
He literally kidnaps someone.
he kind of like, you know, drugs are like, when I
her
was first
hostage,
watching it, I was like, oh, it's like roofies, but a maggot. Like, you know, there's something really gross and scary about him.
Right, on that crazy note, here's my first question. Explain the ecosystem in your own words.
Daff, you want to go first, right? I'm pretty sure you just raised your hand and said, I'll go first.
No, I did not.
I thought I heard that. Maybe the mic
Dan,
didn't pick it up.
you can put your hand down now. It's okay
He's
if you're volunteering
desperate
to
to
go
go.
first. He's chomping at
Right,
the
he's
bit.
just take a breath.
What do you mean? Like, are
So,
we talking about the players in the world? Or
Explain the
how do we
life cycle
understand?
of one of these creatures.
One of these creatures,
The worm?
the worm, the creatures in
anybody.
general, anyone in that film.
Look what's happened now. Look at these two people.
I'll do it.
They were so confident
I'll
just
do
a
it.
minute ago.
I'll do it.
mean?
Explain the ecosystem. Okay.
Go ahead.
Ecosystems are a cycle. So don't mistake the fact that I have to just pick a point to start at for misunderstanding of it.
Okay.
Gonna have to start somewhere in a circle.
do
So
that
let
out of
me
necessity.
start with the orchids. Okay.
Okay.
So that's kind of
Because
starting
the film
towards the end.
essentially starts. Well, no,
What came first, the orchid or the pig?
Am I right? One says to the other.
Podcast title confirmed.
That is something that I missed, actually. I wish I'd seen the film twice to sort of really get a handle on that. Was the flower company appears at the beginning of the film, and maybe I wasn't paying enough attention or something, and then so when it came back around towards the end, I wondered. There's definitely a link there that I've just totally missed.
So
Anyway.
the orchids are special. We'll say that because they're part of this cycle. That's why they're special. And they're harvested by a mother-daughter duo who go out and gather them and then sell them to the thief who is the distributor. But before he sells them on, he checks the soil for these special parasite maggot things, removes them, checks them for the presence of a kind of like chemical, chucks the ones that don't have it, the ones that do, he distills that chemical from them. He also places it in capsules and uses that to drug people because it makes them, it basically just makes them pass out and like become subservient to whoever has the other one, right?
Has the other
maggot. It like connects them.
See, I don't think so.
Or they have like a distillation of it, but he keeps the like maggot itself.
Yeah.
Something happens where he can like control them, because we see that with the dance sequence.
I think you're just you're able to be. I think you become suggestible.
Yeah, so you become suggestible.
Yeah.
Then when you eat, you grow that maggot inside you to a much bigger strength and proportion.
You feed it.
So you feed it and its effects become greater, but perhaps subtler also. So when that maggot is moved into the pig, it's much larger. Maybe that means that its connection can span a further distance, but it's a less observable one in terms of like the pig doesn't go oink and Chris goes oink. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's like a more subtle connection. And then when the pigs have offspring, they maintain part of that connection. That offspring is killed. The chemicals in them leaks into the water, goes into the soil, grows the plants again, and the eggs, I guess, of those maggots are in the ground and are born again.
Fantastic. That's my understanding of it as well. Now, you've just made me think, how many times did Shane Carruth have a draft of this film sitting in front of him where Chris feels the need to oink? No.
This won't do. Crumples a piece of paper. Yeah. I mean, this just wasn't my... I think I began watching the film... I approached it in a similar way to approaching Primer, that I knew that this film had a kind of logic that I wouldn't be able to pick up if I just let the film wash over me.
Right.
And that honestly was... I had a similar relationship to this film as I would maybe the first time I watched Mulholland Drive or something like that.
Okay, yeah.
I knew that it had its own kind of internal logic, but I sort of wanted to believe it was more dreamlike. I wanted to believe that it wasn't clear what the connections were. Mm-hmm. That I thought of it more as a sort of mood piece that did have a narrative aspect, but I thought perhaps this is just something that I need to watch it again to really grasp.
Yeah.
I need to become accustomed to the muddled kind of...
The thing I'd sort of liked about watching it was it seemed to really have, as logical as we're all sort of making it sound, that it does have a kind of coherent ecosystem. I did prefer seeing things almost sort of having a surreal relationship to each other.
Yeah.
No, I sort of know where you're coming from, but the thing is, I think that there's still enough magic in this film that it keeps it very interesting, which is, and that is exactly, what is it that this chemical compound created by decomposing pigs that are what is this power? Is are we suggesting that this is a form of spooky action at a distance, like was just proven the other week to be able to happen on non-quantum level materiality? Are we suggesting that there's a kind of scientific quantum material entanglement going on here?
Well, if you think about
is it telekinesis? Is it is it a kind of expanded consciousness? Is it a not Lacanian, Jungian? Is it a kind of Jungian collective unconsciousness that's being suggested here? There's so many different ways of interpreting this. Oh yeah, by the way, that was a fantastic account of the ecosystem.
Oh
yeah, I thought that was spot on.
We did.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was.
But what I'm thinking is there's like a basis for understanding it in the world, because Jane Bennett talks about different ecosystems of things related to one another, so she can make a seemingly political phenomenon really grounded in materiality.
So that's Jane Bennett, the new materialist philosopher.
How what do you call it?
Trash bag or a stump?
Yeah, how a bunch of seemingly desperate trash can be collected together. How a blackout can be connected to different things. So things that we read politically. Yeah, she talks about materiality of things. And I think that's something that always really fascinated me was the mad cow disease and how we were feeding cows to cows and nature responded and made this thing happen where proteins or protons, proteins would fold in your brain.
Again, they're weird things.
They're weird things. They would basically fold weird because of what we did.
And essentially
and cause a gap in your brain.
Zombification.
And it was like a kind of zombification of humans. Like it literally made matter disappear where matter should be. So like, if you think about this whole ecosystem and like the weirdness of like the blue orchid and how the pigs being at that point in the rivers, maybe not, you know, how they naturally would have appeared there without our intervention. Obviously, we're part of the whole ecosystem and it's not unnatural that happened. But I think that like there's just like a lot of weird shit that happens with things being connected.
Yeah.
And if you're someone that's thinking about that a lot, then this movie is like, oh yeah, cool. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
But I think a lot of people aren't spending time thinking about it, and that's okay.
But seemingly everything kind of has like a political kind of
that's an
magic
question.
about it.
I mean, I just wanted to kind of frame it slightly and just ask, you know, the major theme. I think there is a major theme in this movie, whether or not it's intended, of interconnection and interconnectivity.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, how is it that you read that and interpreted it? You know, Heather, I think you've been saying that you had a kind of new materialist or deep ecological reading of the kind of entanglement going on here. I mean, Dav, you were saying that you were feeling that it's much more of a surreal connection going on.
Like almost a sort of, I wouldn't want to say free associative necessarily.
Okay, no, but I know what you mean though.
It did seem to...
Stream of consciousness maybe? Or?
Yeah, stream of consciousness,
Right.
I think. It has a logic. It's more of a sort of holistic approach. Like this idea that, you know, not that I'm accustomed to reading science at all, but humans and pigs being somewhat similar,
right,
in terms of genetic makeup or something like that.
Yes.
Am I right saying that?
Yeah, no,
yeah.
They're pretty similar, yeah.
And if you think about like a romantic drama, like mostly the genre introduces people to one another through like shared likes, like, oh, they both like the same band, or like the meet cute, and like just this idea of having like a criteria of like similar interests. It's like it's just a very like unmaterial way of looking at it, whereas like the way that they meet is just kind of like the opposite. It's like so material without, it's kind of hollow in terms of like,
but
they don't really have any.
It's a shared trauma though.
Yeah.
So it's Fault in Our Stars, really.
No.
Sorry, everyone.
No, but do you know what I mean? Like, it's not like they meet on the train and he's like, oh, I like your fucked up badge. And she's like, oh yeah, I love that badge. And then they like go to a bookstore together.
I don't appreciate being attacked like this on my own podcast.
Just like,
hey, do you like death grips?
I think we're also bored with that. So like the fact that they meet and they have like nothing to talk about but are like connected, like that's really cool.
And there is an implication that Jeff...
That's kind of romantic.
What do you mean pushes it?
Yeah,
there is a feeling that like the way they meet isn't it doesn't feel wholly positive.
It's not like 50-50. Yeah.
At times it feels weirdly manipulative. It seems like one person isn't saying something, another person is saying something that implies that the other person is being manipulated in some way.
There's not a lot of verbal communication.
Yeah. Okay, I think this is going to suggest just how still immature I am, but isn't that more real? Isn't that more real? Isn't that what real relationships are like? I thought
about this as I was watching it. I thought, clearly I'm watching this, it doesn't seem like a romantic meeting that I'm used to seeing in films, basically. Right. Maybe that's one of the things that I think this film has in common with Eternal Sunshine, is that the relationship between...
meeting on a train as well, right?
But obviously there is an uneven relationship between them. I mean, Jim Carrey's character is quiet, reserved, and then Kate Winslet's character is sort of boisterous, in his face. Doesn't seem like they would work on paper. It seems like one of them is being manipulated, or one of them isn't being entirely truthful. Mm-hmm. And that was the impression I got from Jeff and Chris in this movie. That I was starting to wonder.
Did you almost call Chris Karen?
No, I almost called her Cat.
Oh, okay. She's got a bit of a Karen
She's got a
haircut.
Karen haircut.
My
But
God.
so
She wants to speak to the manager.
to come back to my point.
She does speak to the manager,
Intersubjectivity.
and she shoots
What
him.
manager does she? Oh my God!
Jesus. Oh my, she
She
did.
speaks to the
That's
manager
true.
of ecosystems.
Oh shit, she
and
totally
like,
does.
Of Quinoa
So
Valley.
to get back to my point, I was wondering what you guys would have made. Like, do we view what exactly do you think is immature about your viewpoint about this relationship, Connor? Like,
Well, I suppose, if I think about something, recent writings on romance and making relationships work will say that it's all about free, open communication.
Yeah.
Not necessarily
an authenticity, right?
It's authentic, difficult
Yeah.
communication where you struggle through and do your best to have a shared shared understanding
Yeah.
and have a shared value system. And if you find a point that you cannot negotiate past because it's not going to make both people sort of equally grow
Yeah.
in a positive way, positive defined on their own kind of limits, then it's time to kind of grow beyond that, and I'm trying to remember who I'm ripping that off right now.
well, I think that like, all relationships are unequal.
Just to finish that thought, then, is just to say, but this film is not that. There is a certain romantic fatalism behind it.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Because Jeff always knows he's kind of cheating. Jeff always knows what Chris is feeling because he does, because they literally share
They are
thoughts.
connected. Yeah,
they
yeah,
literally share feelings.
They share
That's
memories.
Right.
I'm not
I forgot
sure.
about that. I forgot about the whole thing where he's like taking on her memories.
That was a great bit. That
Love
was a
that
really great bit. Yeah. Again, to bring it back to Eternal Sunshine, that's what the relationship in that film is. It's not so much that they share memories, but they just have. It's about two people who deliberately wipe each other's memories of each other,
Yes.
and they find each other again.
But they're living in that same shared liminal dream space,
Yeah. And choosing to have this romantic relationship despite that.
Yeah.
Having.
Well, that's a really interesting way of seeing this film. Is like, well, what if Eternal Sunshine, but instead of the dream world, you just take that dream logic and apply it to reality. I mean, that's a cool way of reading the film.
like they're living in that dream space.
I had a further question based on that theme of interconnectivity, though. And my own reading of the interconnectivity thing is based around Karen Barrett's idea. Oh, if anybody knows me, there should be a giant horn goes off anytime I say Karen Barrett. But based on Karen Barrett's idea of interactivity, where materiality is assumed to be kind of the only one shared thing, but phenomena precedes existence. So, action takes place, giving rise to thingness is kind of the simplest way of putting it. And you can see that in this film, where there seems to be interconnectivity, but bursting out of that interconnectivity is then subjectivity. So you have these two characters that have shared memories or are sharing feelings. They can both hear those sounds coming from far away. If you remember that bit.
Yeah.
But they hear the sounds differently.
Right.
So they're having.
It's a perfect balance of like nature and nurture, like gene presentation. Like, we've come to understand that like in terms of psychology and like human behavior, like in the 70s there was the whole idea of like it's 100% environment. Like, there was a whole thing about like distant mothers produce autistic children. Like, there was no understanding of like genes at all. Then there was a move towards like, oh, genes always have a presentation for things, but it's
Dawkins,
such a complex interplay of the two things. So like, genetically they may be quite connected with their pigs and the maggot, and they've grown closer in their genetic, but in terms of their individual interplay with their environment, it presents in very different ways. Like, I think that Jeff seems at first to be the driver of their relationship by being the one that like pursues Chris, but then he's actually quite subordinate to her because she's sort of inaccessible to him. So he's like, what are you thinking? Where do you want to go? Like, even though he like pursued her, he's not really his specific interplay with environment and that symbiosis presents in like seeking her out, but then not necessarily being the dominant one in any other way. So it's like kind of I think it's such a cool film scientifically for the way that it looks at, like, yes, they're connected, but it manifests in different ways for each of them, which is how, for example, like, same cell identical twins don't both end up with, like, schizophrenia. Like, you know, if it was all were the exact same, then you would present the same way, but it's like this very, like, intimate play with your environment that makes certain genes come on. I'm just so interested in all that. So I feel like the way that they're connected but different is, like,
to be clear, are we talking about how there's one scene where they both hear the sound?
Yes, digging in the back.
Yeah, exactly. But they hear it differently.
That Jeff hears 2 tones, is that right?
Yeah,
and then Chris hears just the one.
I think Jeff hears,
or it's the other way around.
Wowie, and she hears Wabo. I'm trying to reference a meme here, but I can't remember.
With how people say Huawei differently?
No. Do you remember that stupid thing where there was that clip?
There was a sound clip.
Oh, yeah.
It's and like the dress as well that got people on Ellen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but it does
this
kind of...
stuff is very lucrative.
It does.
People love it.
It does. It plays out really, really well because she's saying that she's hearing this, like, intermittent, high-pitched sound, and then he says, "No, it's a low rumbling."
Yeah.
But then they go, "It's both."
Yeah.
You know.
So
yeah.
So they have these kind of overlapping but then melding into each other's subjectivities that kind of appear and then disappear, and, you know, there's I, but then there's we, and it's very cool. In my plot summary, I definitely did a flex, and I gave my reading of the film. This is something I'm not very sure of. What did you think of my reading of the film? That I think the way that they get the sampler is that they use their interlinked identity to fool him into thinking that they're both in the same room.
And they trap him by bringing him into...
Well, he thinks he's safe because he thinks that both of the people are there.
Yes. Yeah.
But then when she looks at him, that's when he knows...
Yeah.
Oh, shit, she gets it.
I think that's right. But the thing that leaves me, like, kind of confused and mixed up is, like, what the sampler's really doing when he's, like, going and visiting people. Like,
see, that's the thing. I think it's a two-way. It's a rhizome. Yes,
it's a rhizome.
Deleuze.
It's only
fantastic.
a matter of time. Now I have to understand what that means.
But then why don't we see them, like, in the room with their pigs when they're connecting to their pigs? Like, why do we only see the sampler in the same physical space as people as a representation of them being connected?
It's a great question. My reading of it is that the pigness, you know, is that when we're being shown Chris or Jeff in the film, is that what we're being shown is kind of like a representation of the kind of big picture view of what that being has become, you know,
of what the sampler has become.
Well, yeah, even that, but that there's kind of a shared system going on between all of the people who have been sampled, all of the pigs, but that there are nodes within that network almost. You know, there are points that can be discerned as, you know, if you take all of the interconnecting lines, some of these lines only connect in a certain way, and then that point could be labeled Chris. That other point could be labeled Jeff. This point where it all connects is the sampler. Yeah. You know, and he is connected to everybody. Now, maybe this is because I probably know more about computer science than anything else that I have to default to understanding it via like TCP/IP. But, you know, he basically would be the intersecting
server
point. Yeah. He's like the server system. He's the infrastructure that allows packet switching to take place. Yeah.
Right.
You know?
Okay.
But that was my reading of it, and that's what he's doing is, and I actually think that the thief, in my mind, the thief is the only one who's not getting high on his own supply. The thief isn't in the network.
Yeah.
He is just able to remain above the whole thing.
Sure.
And, you know, traffic these people around, but that the sampler, by being in such close proximity to the pigs, but he's probably taken this drug himself. He has kind of entered into this world of like shared experience and is really happy to just drift through it. But you see him as well in the film. He's really reluctant to react with the vet that comes to the farm.
That's right. Yeah, his whole demeanor seems to really change. It almost feels like he's performing.
Yes,
almost he's acting.
But he seems very hostile to other humans in reality. Like he doesn't. It suggests that he is someone who doesn't want to experience the complexity of human beings and the way that we communicate, directly but indirectly. Going back to something like Wittgenstein, that we use language and so much is lost through like noise and communication.
Yeah.
Thinking of like Walter and Grusin or something like that. But in those kinds of forms of communication, that frustrates him in the same way that he gets frustrated when he's trying to do his noise recordings. You know, that he doesn't like the amount of interference that's coming into these samples. So instead, he just wants to have this direct connection with human beings that he's able to get.
Unmediated almost.
Exactly. Where he ceases to exist and he can just experience people. And it doesn't really matter to him what they're feeling, if it's pain or pleasure or what, but
I like how non-verbal it is in that way, like
yeah,
in terms of Chris and Jeff, but then also like the way that Chris continues to like repeat the lines from Walden, and that's like something that forms a basis for them to kind of communicate about, like with Jeff being like, whoa, what are you doing? What are you talking about? And then he goes away and investigates it. So it's like something that seems nonsensical, but provides like further communication between
That's my
them.
last like serious question is, do we think that there's more to Walden? Like, is it important that it was Walden? So, Walden is a book about Henry David Thoreau going and trying to become self-sufficient in a time when we didn't, when it's kind of incomparable to today.
Yeah.
And in fairness, he did have the luxury of being able to go and stay on this place without having to pay rent or anything like that. So, he's able to go to Walden Pond, but he does manage to, live sturdily in a way that infuriates Glasgow comedian.
I think it's also important that it be viewed in sort of American transcendentalist
exactly tradition,
because it's seen as something like godlike to go connect with nature.
Or also it feeds into this idea of the frontier almost. It's like a return to the frontier,
Whereas now
re-establishing, I don't know,
or at least in the UK, I think there's people like, I can't think of any names, but I feel like it's just kind of more contemporary to think of like nature as queer. As opposed to like religious, like that feels like the turn now. So
that feels like a very recent turn, but
he interprets like nature as like a representation of God or like this transcendental experience, but like we would maybe read it as like transcendental in a different way now.
What is the name for that urge, the movement towards the West called? That
manifest destiny.
Expansion.
Manifest destiny.
What
exactly.
is that? Is that what that was?
Yeah, it's a whole thing.
So you're manifesting your destiny by like.
Well, it's just the kind of the inherent philosophy of American settlers. It is an interesting thing. That definitely comes up. But do you think that can be read in some way into the text of this film, or is it just kind of a cool, kitschy book?
It's important that like he doesn't have a job in Walden other than to survive, right? And write down his experiences. And like both our characters lose their jobs at the start of the movie.
Yeah.
So it does seem kind of like...
Go on.
Well, it just seems kind of romantic to me in the same way. The idea of not having a job, basically. But like the way it plays out is obviously different. Like, you're right, Connor, that we don't see them struggle in terms of like they don't end up homeless for having lost their job and their money, and that's like weird. But it's really challenging for them being like made symbiote with this parasite, but also like kind of aspirational because like they don't have to be this like cog in the machine in the same way anymore. Like they're transcendental in this other way. So
okay. So they kind of managed to live the Walden dream in some bizarre way.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe
it's been a long time since I've read Walden. I think I read it in maybe my second year of university or something.
Was that around the same time that you got really into film? As mentioned earlier,
a little bit,
maybe they become each other's pond.
But I think
I don't know. Like, what's the pond?
I think the idea with Walden was that I think Thoreau believed that humanity had lost something in becoming kind of urbanized in some sense.
And like industrial.
Yeah, and industrial, exactly. So it's a work about trying to reconnect with what he believed to be a more authentic sort of oneness with nature. And I think probably God as well. Maybe someone in the comments can correct this if they know Walden a little bit better than I do. But it was this idea of a return to nature. But I think if this film is about anything, it's about there's some kind of layer of disconnect between the people and nature, right?
Yeah.
It's about sort of being unable to understand. I think there's something to the fact that they end up killing the sampler.
Yeah.
Because I don't necessarily believe that the sampler was a threat. I don't think.
Well, no, I will just say that was something that I only got the second time around, because definitely the second time around I was watching going like, wow, the sampler is amazing. He's just giving them like, a crash course in interactive theory.
Yeah.
But then I thought about it, and the thing is, the sampler has murdered their children. Because it's not...
Right, okay, because in exchange for this kind of intra-connected life, they have to sacrifice
there is no distance.
The future generation, I guess.
Well, that's what he has to do,
yeah.
But for Chris and Jeff, it's not that he killed their distant symbiote children.
Yeah.
For her, it literally feels like she had those kids, and now they've all been murdered by this guy.
Mm-hmm.
But the important thing is like the piglets are murdered to create more of the sample for the thief to take to do his like financial fraud thievery.
Yes,
so ultimately it's like a financial exchange. Like, so part of their like transcendental connection to everything is lost because money still needs to be made. Like this whole thing can't continue without that aspect, because at some point the thief takes all their money. We don't know what he does with it. Presumably pays for this whole thing to take place. So it's this experiment of the samplers.
I think that's where the money for the farm is coming from.
Well, exactly. Like the
interesting.
Because that vet comes over and is like, "Oh, do you want to sell me these pigs?" And he's hostile to him. To create its own ecosystem,
he does need money.
Money needs to come into the picture somewhere. So the like sacrifice of losing their pigs is like, I guess, the anti-Walden part where, Walden can just go live and not have to worry about money in this little ecosystem. But for their ecosystem to continue, there needs to be a sacrifice.
Yeah, I think if anyone is Henry David Thoreau in this, it's actually the sampler. He
gets that kind of freedom.
He's the one. Yeah.
But there's
sort of
sacrifices
you
along
wonder
the
if
way.
he's sort of blissfully ignorant of the fact that he is being bankrolled, essentially.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. Or he knows it's a necessary evil or something like that.
Yeah.
Where did he get the money for those subwoofers?
That's what I want to know. Six subwoofers.
I call them the dogs. You want to hear them bark? Right. Here's a couple of questions, a couple of silly ones. So
it's time for the silly segment.
So, question number 8, apparently. Should Shane Carruth quit making films?
I sometimes wonder. I don't know. I wonder what this... So, yeah, apparently he's working on one last big project, major project, as he put it on Twitter. I do wonder. I don't know. Like, part of me would like for him to just be super prolific, but at the same time, there would be nothing better for the mystique of Shane Carruth if he just made 3 films and then just out. I mean, we're just left with 3 solid films, and that was it.
Oh, and
that's providing that the
so many
final
hipster
project
tattoos.
Yeah.
I'd like to answer in a new materialist way.
Go on.
I don't think Shane Carruth exists anymore.
Okay, yeah.
The Shane Carruth that made like Primer and Upstream Color
he's in the water now.
Well, he's been like...
He's a colour in the Orchid.
He's just been like... I don't know, he's just been changed by his whole experience with Hollywood. So like the same person who was like bright-eyed and keen bushy-tailed and make these movies, like it doesn't exist anymore. So I don't think we will get another film from Shane Carruth, and that's okay.
It's not okay.
Hollywood killed his pig babies.
Yeah, exactly.
They tickled his orchid and turned it blue.
Oh my gosh!
I'm glad I got that White Stripes reference.
Is he saying you
tickled my orchid?
I thought he said
Ew.
you took a white orchid.
I thought he
and
said you
turned-
took
Oh.
all my orchids and turned them blue.
I prefer my version.
Tickled
if that's the
Gross.
right one.
You tickled my
My
orchid.
That's
turned it
disgusting.
blue.
Grim.
Come on.
My mum listens to this. How dare you?
Yeah, I've heard that about.
Here's another question. Second last question. Is this the best film ever made? Silence is Assent. Fantastic. Okay, moving on.
No, please ask us what we would do if we got the worm in us.
Oh, really?
What? I don't want to think about that.
That's my favourite question to do with
in
a
my
movie.
mind,
What would you do?
In my mind, this is the only reason that we even talk about this film in a horror-themed podcast.
Because you wouldn't want it to
I don't want to
happen.
think about that. That's the horror.
Stabby, stab, stab.
Stabby, stab,
Get the
stab.
worm out.
Yeah. Get this thing out of me.
That bit is
Why
horrid.
doesn't she?
Yeah.
Why doesn't she go to A&E?
Because she lives in America. She would need to pay.
Oh, it would be so expensive.
This
like
is
that's
America.
a big worm. It's like 3 meters.
This is America. Don't get a worm in you.
Don't get a worm in you.
Oh fuck, that's right. Because it doesn't work in Scotland. You'd be like, oh, there's a weird thing moving under my skin. Hello, can I get a free ambulance to get it taken out?
I think the alcohol level in our bodies is far too high as well. The worms wouldn't stand a chance.
Oh
Absolutely.
my
That's
god,
true.
there's
Kills
no
it dead.
sustenance for that worm.
You asking if it's the best film ever made? Obviously a facetious question, but I do. One of the markers that I have for films that I really enjoy is that I keep thinking about them later on, and I mean it's really boring and trite to say, but I really do want to watch this a couple more times. I think, like Primer.
I think it's the best film ever made because I am a Renaissance woman of the deep web and I love to read loads of weird little bits and bobs. And for someone to synthesize all those wee bits and bobs of like science and like narrative and schloop them together and make a really cool bit of art, like how did he do that? Like it is magic.
It feels very contemporary with a lot of I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking mostly of sort of autofiction or this sort of newer style of writing memoir.
It's actually like so contemporary for even like 2013.
Yeah.
Like if I think about a lot of science to come out over the last like 10 years, he's just right about a lot of stuff. Like if you think about the worm as being like part of your microbiome, like and affecting your personality, like stuff like that. Just he's just got so much shit.
Right.
Eatily right.
Final question. How cute are those pigs?
The cutest.
I know.
The best pigs.
I wish my
Good little pig
like
actors.
possibility for child breeding was only related to pigs.
So you're interested in vitro fertilization.
Would you like a pig? Yes. Every time, yes.
All right. That was fantastic. Thanks so much for talking about that film, for allowing me to cheat and just not really pick a horror film.
That's your loyalty card torn up now.
It definitely.
You need to get a
it's
new one. You get a
spooky
new
film.
one. You get a
It's
new
spooky
one.
film.
I
So-
feel like Twin Peaks wasn't really horror.
Oh, I don't know.
Fire Walk with Me.
It was more. I don't know. I think it was more observable as horror than
Than this was?
Upstream Color. Yeah.
Okay, fair
I have no problem with it. I have no problem.
Okay.
With it.
So next week, we're going to have Heather is going to be the host, right?
Yeah,
are
I'll
we
just.
looking at?
I'm
Dark
going to
Waters.
take you all back. Do a wee classic horror, bit like The Ring, Dark Water. Super cool, super spooky,
Super Japanese.
super Japanese.
Absolutely.
Just like, let's just take it back to the old stuff.
Yeah, I didn't want to overload us with Japanese stuff, so next time it's me, we'll do One Cut of the Dead. But, it's
Yes.
good to stagger out the Japanese horror so it doesn't become SpookBox, the Japanese
There is
horror.
another.
Why?
There is a
Why would we
film-
want it to not?
There is a film that it's definitely a terrible film,
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
but it
tell
is
us
the
more.
only film that I can think of that has the name David in it,
Fantastic.
and I'm so
and because
curious.
you're like,
and because it's like,
prone to-
it's me. I've never been in a film
love
before.
that.
I love that.
So what's that called?
The Dark.
Well,
It is-
we're
it
doing
is-
the Dark
It
then.
is a ring clone of the lowest caliber.
wow.
Is it Welsh?
No, but it's
Oh.
based in Wales.
Fantastic.
Get this right.
Brilliant.
Wales is spooky.
We're looking forward to that.
place.
Dragons and
look,
shit.
if you are listening to the podcast, please accept our biggest thank you. It means the world to me. The other two don't care. But it really is great.
We're the
And
talent.
I care.
We're not paid to care. We're not paid.
If you can, please subscribe, like the video, all that kind of YouTube stuff, and, maybe tell a friend about it. I'll try to get it out in some other platforms and that kind of thing. But other than that, thank you for listening, and see you next time.
We love you. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.